Hello, my name is Celine Marcos, and I will be presenting a contextual analysis and list of recommendations to children in conflict as I anticipate military confrontations as a result of potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. In this presentation, I will cover a contextual analysis on the relationships between the United States, China, and Taiwan, a contextual analysis of humanitarian access points, gaps and challenges, and recommendations for children in conflict moving forward. Upon entering negotiations with China, children in conflict must understand the political dynamics, historic and present, surrounding the relationship between China and the United States and China and Taiwan. It is understood that children in conflict have serious concerns that China will invade Taiwan, which has significant potential to spark an international armed conflict, generating devastation on civilian populations. The dynamic and complex landscape of international relations between China, Taiwan, and the United States will contribute to and underpin any potential invasion. In regard to relations with Taiwan, the People's Republic of China and the United States operate similar but different frameworks. China's one China principle asserts there is only one China, Taiwan is a part of and Taiwan is a part of China. The United States, on the other hand, follows its own one China policy, acknowledging one Chinese government while also maintaining commercial and cultural ties to Taiwan independently from the People's Republic of China and selling arms to Taiwan for the territory's self-defense. Over the past several years, the United States has strengthened its diplomatic relationship with Taiwan, including visits from high-level U.S. officials that have elicited strong condemnation from China and strained the cross-strait relationship between China and Taiwan. Both the United States and China have increased preparation for potential war with each other. And although it is unclear at this time how a great power conflict between the two countries will occur, some U.S. experts foresee an invasion of Taiwan within the next decade. Children in Conflict predicts an invasion as soon as 2027. Within this political context, children in conflict will need to negotiate with the People's Republic of China for access to civilians. China's existing approaches and perceptions of humanitarian aid will be an essential contextual factor that children in conflict should consider prior to entering negotiations. In recent years, China has increased its commitment to humanitarian aid and has expanded its humanitarian outreach to refugee populations across the globe, most notably in Syria. China's involvement in humanitarian practice has become more public as well, and although the country's monetary involvement remains low compared to other countries, China has increased its public commitments to humanitarian support for refugees over the past few years and provided funding for several UN initiatives. China's recent uptake in public commitment to aid, however, is not just a commitment to goodwill and humanitarian principles, but a strategic diplomatic decision to control regional and global perceptions of its image. Children in conflict must prepare to negotiate humanitarian access within the pre-existing humanitarian framework in China. As with any major armed conflict, there will be huge implications to civilian infrastructure, including shelter, roads, and access to key services, food and clean water, wash supplies, medicine, healthcare, and education. Populations may be directly targeted, and injury and loss of life will occur. Communities may be displaced, sparking a refugee crisis in the region. Taiwan, in particular, is susceptible to major disruptions in food supply should there be a Chinese military invasion as well. Should a large-scale military operation occur, there is a risk that armed actors may not support access for humanitarians or pauses in fighting for humanitarian purposes. And although China has demonstrated an increased commitment to humanitarian aid abroad, there may be reluctance to provide an outside organization, such as Children in Conflict, access locally for fear of harming China's image, especially should children in conflict engage in advocacy efforts. Additionally, children in conflict will have to remain grounded in humanitarian principles throughout negotiations, which can be difficult given the political nature of a potential military conflict. Much of China's engagement with and investments into humanitarian aid are rooted in political motivations. For instance, strategically filling in new gaps caused by cuts to USAID by the Trump administration or increasing influence at the United Nations. Negotiating access with China must not be construed as assisting China politically, nor can children in conflict betray impartiality or neutrality when negotiating access, as doing so can impact the organization's credibility. Children in conflict should anticipate that access to impacted populations will be negotiated with Chinese counterparts. This memo contains 3 recommendations for children in conflict as it prepares to enter into humanitarian negotiations with China. The first recommendation is to emphasize early relationship building through an emphasis on localization, cultural competence, and solid contextual understandings of political dynamics, especially between China and Taiwan. The importance of early relationship building cannot be overstated. However, prior to direct engagement with Chinese leadership, children in conflict must commit to cultural and contextual competence in order for successful engagement and negotiations with China. Robust preparation and training opportunities for staff must take place, and negotiating staff should be assigned appropriately. Prior to the start of the negotiation process, children in conflict must develop a strong and credible presence within China, leveraging what is known about China's commitment to humanitarian aid. There are already many points of access within the Chinese private and NGO sectors, as Chinese agencies and organizations already have ample experience and expertise in natural disaster response, emergency preparedness, public health, development, and renewable energy. Establishing a presence among Chinese agencies prior to the onset of conflict will help children in conflict develop credibility within the country. Long-term presence can facilitate trust and relationship building and can help combat any misperceptions about children in conflict in China. When the time comes to negotiate with the People's Republic of China and its military, children in conflict will have an already well-established presence and network of local organizations to boost its legitimacy. Recommendation 2 is to build an island of agreement with Chinese counterparts, emphasizing shared interests in humanitarian action and development. Upon entering negotiations with China, children in conflict should rely on the Chinese government's previous dealings with humanitarian efforts in order to better leverage a normative understanding of the need for humanitarian aid, approaching negotiations through the lens of CCHN's Island of Agreement. The Island of Agreement is a framework that aims to build relationships with counterparts by incorporating counterparts' perspectives within the negotiation process. Building an Island of Agreement will require children in conflict to view the current context and any future armed conflict through the lenses of the following categories: contested facts, agreed facts, convergent norms, and divergent norms. With China, a convergence of norms exists. Humanitarian access and humanitarian action are necessary and important. While a divergence exists where motivation is concerned, so long as access can be negotiated and so long as children in conflict acts within humanitarian principles and guidelines, children in conflict negotiators need not sway China to reevaluate their motivations. Children in conflict can rely on the CCHN's Island of Agreement tool to approach a factual negotiation with China. Children in conflict is also in a favorable position as an organization aimed to support children. Children in conflict can draw on convergent norms to convince counterparts of the need to grant access, humanitarian pauses, or humanitarian corridors for the sake of children's safety and security. In alignment with China's use of humanitarian aid to support its image building efforts, the mission and work of Children in Conflict will support the People's Republic of China's efforts to build its image. However, it is essential for children in conflict to remain committed to the humanitarian principle of neutrality and impartiality, and leveraging Chinese political priorities within negotiations cannot be an endorsement of using children in conflict to further such policies. Recommendation 3 is to maintain professional and technical negotiations, lowering the risk within the negotiation process, and securing access to impacted and vulnerable populations, especially should large-scale conflict erupt. Once Children in Conflict begins negotiations with China, it must contain the negotiation process to professional and technical negotiations. Implementing this recommendation is contingent upon the aforementioned two, as professional and technical negotiations require a previously established relationship between the negotiator and counterparts, as well as a firm understanding of the need for children in conflict's presence. Remaining within the realm of professional and technical negotiations mitigates the risk of loss of access, establishes a mutual and respectful relationship between parties, especially since professional negotiations in particular require shared consensus of local professionals. Engaging in lower risk negotiations aims to establish an agreement upon the importance of children in conflict's work in order to secure access to vulnerable populations while maintaining connections and relationships with local organizations. Given increasingly volatile and tense relationships between China, Taiwan, and the United States, children in conflict should be prepared to negotiate access to populations who will be impacted by military aggression. Children in conflict will face challenges and dilemmas regarding how to best reach those in need of critical aid, but proper preparation and contextual understandings will enable children in conflict to forge strong relationships, find common ground, and achieve needed access. Thank you.